Hey guys, so today we are going to answer a subscriber question, and the question was basically posted to me this morning. Couldn't really sleep, so I woke up in the middle of the night and just went through some comments and some stuff. And basically the question was, Frederick, from your perspective, which is more in demand, front-end developers or back-end developers? So let's get into it. Now this is a great question. And hopefully I can give you a fairly accurate assessment of how, what the lay of the land is and kind of the situation just in general. But hopefully this will make sense to you. Now, you have to remember something when it comes to job availability and what is in demand, that it can vary a lot from region to region as well. All I can give you is my perspective and what I see, and from the newsletters that I receive and from the job offers that I receive and from the job postings on the market and so forth. But always remember that it may vary from region to region. But overall, I think that this should be a fairly universal assessment. At least I hope so. So first and foremost, we have to define, what does in demand mean? Does it mean that you're very popular, that you get paid a lot, or you get recruited? Exactly. It's just define it from the perspective of the job taker. For what does it mean for you to be in demand? So in general, when it comes to front-end and back-end, you will find that back-end developer jobs, well, there's quite a few of them. There's actually more on average than you will find in front-end. And if you think about that, that makes a lot of sense, because there are more systems that have a requirement of software. You have all kinds of computer programs that are not user focused, or that are not being shown to a user. They don't require a graphical interface. Just off the bat, that means that there are going to be quote-unquote more jobs available, because back-end development is a hard requirement for almost every single front-end project. If you have a user-facing interface, odds are that you have a system that is doing something. So when it comes to just jobs overall, back-end is fairly popular. But that does not mean that you are more in demand as a back-end developer necessarily. It depends on your definition, because there are also a larger quantity of back-end developers. The reason for this is because front-end, or this type of development, hasn't really been around all that long. But back-end development has been around since computer science. Kind of makes sense if you think about it. So when it comes to our education system, it's very optimized towards producing back-end developers. So the quantity of jobs are higher, but there's also a higher quantity of back-end developers. So if you want to look at it, it kind of depends on how you look at it. You may say that there's more competition, but honestly, guys, when it comes to competition in this industry, there is some competition, but the deficit of programmers is so massive, guys. It is really massive. I'm not saying that you will never be turned down for a job because somebody else was more, had a better CV than you, or was a better fit for the company. But I think that if you have the proper education and you're a decent developer, you don't have to worry so much about competition, really. It's just really about getting the sort of job that you want. Anywho, so that's first and foremost. The amount of jobs for back-end developers is higher. There's tons of, on average, I can tell you right from my experience, an average development team has more than a few back-end developers, and usually a few front-end developers these days. It didn't used to be the case. Sometimes you have full-stack developers. It kind of depends on your situation, but on average, you will find that the people who associate themselves with back-end development is higher than the people who associate themselves with front-end development, just on average. And there's a great report on Stack Overflow if you want to check that out, that kind of proves that point. Anywho, so what does this mean for front-end development? Well, let's talk about in demand again. So when it comes to being in demand, you can also take the perspective, are you more popular? Well, that's also a little bit subjective, because most of the job offers that I get are from people who are looking for Java developers and people who are looking for backend developers specifically, or full stack developers, because that's very important to a lot of companies. But when it comes to being popular and people really lusting for your developer flesh, frontend is much higher on the scale. And the reason is because it is so hard to find good frontend developers. Now we're in this magical little period where all the recruiters and all the naive companies are still learning what a good front-end developer is. And I think it's adorable, because when I talk to recruiters, they say that, oh yeah, it's fairly easy to find JavaScript developers and so forth. And then they hire people who have taken a few bootcamp courses and they have some basic knowledge of JavaScript. And I come to projects where I see that these so-called front-end developers, I mean, these are just, some of them are just college kids who know a bit of JavaScript. And if that is what is required for you to be what I call a good front-end developer, then yeah, then I'm pretty sure that what's going to happen right now is what's coming up. Like basically, we're going to go full circle again, or rather we're going to iterate once more, because what happened just a few years ago was that people started realizing that the complexity of front-end or UX development and JavaScript and CSS, like all this stuff, it grew to the point where you used to think that, oh yeah, we'll just hire a bunch of really cool, awesome backend developers and they'll do that too. The problem was that it got to the point where it was so tricky for these backend developers to maintain a consistent and good project that everything just fell to a big mess basically. And that's where we are today. That's why front-end is getting to be so popular, because people have realized that the complexity of front-end has grown to the point where you need somebody who really knows their stuff and actually can produce consistent results. Just as we've learned in backend. Backend has kind of learned how to make the sort of software that can scale over time. Front-end is still trying to figure that out, and it's a very chaotic environment to work in. A lot of backend developers I talk to, they try to avoid the front-end because of these issues. And trust me, if you want to be a quote-unquote rock star, it kind of depends on the company, of course. It may vary, but for the most part, I used to be a front-end developer. I mean, my coworkers were very happy that they didn't have to deal with all the bullshit that comes with front-end development these days alone. They were very happy to have somebody who kind of knew how this all worked. And that's what I want to go to, or rather what I want to point out here. So right now, the naive recruiters and naive companies, because there's such a scarcity of front-end developers, and I'm talking good front-end developers. I'm not talking someone who took a few courses on Udacity or Code Academy. I'm talking people who actually know their stuff. So they're hiring people left and right to just do the JavaScript development, but that's going to, in my experience, produce basically the same results as just having a good, quote-unquote good backend developer do the same sort of work. They're just going to produce shitty code, and they do. Most of them just produce shitty code. So my guess is that within the next 5 years, the requirements for what it takes to be a good front-end developer is going to go higher. As the education systems are catching up and trying to basically produce quote-unquote good front-end developers, this idea that you can just learn a bit of JavaScript and become a front-end developer is going to go away. And my guess is that the bar is going to be raised, especially when WebAssembly and these more advanced topics like service workers and so forth come to the table, because we're getting to a point where front-end development, it used to be the case that you didn't need to know much about the backend to be a good front-end developer. That is going away. It is going away quickly. It's getting to the point where I argue that if you want to be a good front-end developer, you kind of have to know, you almost have to start out being a backend developer and then go into front-end. That's at least from my perspective. So this means that if you want to be the most in-demand or trendy type of developer today, front-end is where you should be. But you should also know that it takes more of you to get good at front-end than it takes to get good at back-end. I'm not saying that one is harder than the other, because they have different challenges. It's just that it's the industry and all the education and everything around you is more streamlined when it comes to back-end. It's easier for you to get good at back-end. It's a safer bet. There are more jobs open, and it requires less of you to get good at it. It's still very I'm not trying to say that it's not as tricky. It's more that everything around you is optimized for it. And when it comes to front end, if you get good at front end, you're going to have an amazing time. But it takes a lot of personal effort to get to a point where you're actually fairly good at it. Or you can do, as I said, I think it's going away. This idea that you can just kind of learn some basic JavaScript and hack things together. It's a feasible strategy today, but I'm pretty sure that it's going to go away very quickly. Because at the end of the day, it's a problem where the industry still doesn't know how to maintain a good front-end project. They just have, in my opinion, they need to be shown the way. Because I have met some really shitty front-end developers, and those are most of the people I meet. And I've met some really amazing front-end developers that I look up to quite a bit, and the difference is massive. That's at least from my experience. So, to summarize, if you want a safe bet, do back-end development. If you want to be trendy and in demand, depending on your definition of in demand, go with front-end. Have a great day.